I want to start off by just kind of asking, how easy is it to see that someone else is doing something wrong? Right? It's pretty easy to see something. It's pretty easy to see that someone's doing something wrong. It's a little harder to go. I'm looking at you. This is directly to you, Terry. So it's a little harder to go and tell that person that they're doing something wrong. But one of the hardest things to do is to know when you're doing something wrong, right? And to change that. It's hard to look on the inside and see that you're doing something wrong. And so I kind of want to talk about Galatians 6, 1 through 2 here. And it says this. It says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Right, so we need to hold each other accountable, right? We need to be able to, if we see one of our fellow believers doing something wrong or starting to walk away from God, we need to go to them, and we need to tell them, and we need to do it kindly and in a loving way. We need to restore them. To restore someone or something is to grab something and bring it back to its original spot, its original place. And so that's what we need to do to our fellow believers who start to walk away, right? But when we do that, we got to be careful because it tells us to be careful so that we're not tempted. How many of you guys know that sin is tempting, right? Sin is tempting. Sin sounds so good, right? But it's not. It separates us from God. So we need to be careful so that we're not snuck up on or that sin doesn't surprise us. And Romans 12 tells us this. It says, do not conform to the patterns of the world. And I wondered why. Why not? Because the world likes to tell us that sin is okay now. That there's our little sins that are okay now. And after a while, we start to believe that, right? One thing that I struggled with in college, I never found that home church up in Fresno, right? I never found that church that felt like this, right? So I got a little discouraged, and that made it easier to stay home with my roommate and watch football Sunday mornings, right? If one of us didn't want to go to church, none of us are going to church, right? And we just kind of fed off each other. And there would be weeks where, maybe 3 or 4 Sundays in a row we didn't go to church, right? And that's what sin does, right? Sin starts to consume you if you don't have the right encouragement around. And so we need to carry each other's burdens and help each other out in any way possible because it fulfills the law of Christ. Jesus Christ tells us 2 things. He tells us the 2 greatest commandments. He says one is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself, right? So I want to leave you guys with these questions here. Are we loving our neighbor as ourselves? Right, when we see our neighbor doing something wrong, are we going to them and trying to restore them? Or are we going to them just to point out their wrongdoing? If we're going to them just to point out their wrongdoing, that's not right. What we need to do is do it out of love so we can restore them back to Jesus Christ. Thank you, guys.